The architecture of revenge. I remember the night it all burned down. My love, my trust, my entire life. It didn't start with fire, though. It started with laughter, with promises whispered over late-night coffee, with his hand brushing against mine under the city lights. His name was Adrian. My name? Jane. And once upon a time, I thought he was the best thing that ever happened to me. Adrian wasn't just my boyfriend, he was my business partner, my confidant, the person who said he believed in me when no one else did. Together, we built Viridian, a design startup that began in my apartment living room. I handled the creative side, the sketches, the branding, the heart of it. Adrian handled the business, the numbers, and the clients. I trusted him with the contracts, the finances, everything I didn't want to deal with. And maybe that's where my first mistake began. The company took off faster than we expected. Our designs were featured in magazines, investors wanted meetings, and my inbox overflowed with congratulations. For a while, it felt like a dream. But slowly, the small things began to shift. He started calling it his company during interviews. He signed deals without consulting me. When I confronted him, he'd laugh, saying, "You're the artist, Jane. Let me handle the real world." I brushed it off. I told myself he meant well. Love makes you blind, doesn't it? But blindness comes at a price. The first crack came when I found an email on his laptop, an unsigned investor contract that cut me out entirely. My name was missing. I stared at the glowing screen for what felt like hours. When he came home, I asked about it calmly. He smiled and kissed my forehead. "You worry too much. I'll fix it." He didn't fix it. He finalized it. Overnight, Viridian was no longer mine. He changed the documents, moved the funds, replaced the passwords. When I realized what he'd done, I confronted him again, this time shaking, tears burning my eyes. And that's when he said it, the words that hollowed me out completely. "You're talented, Jane, but you're naive. This is business. You should thank me for protecting you from yourself." I slapped him. I don't even remember doing it, but I did. He just smirked and walked out, leaving me alone in the apartment I had paid for, with my name already removed from the lease. The betrayal would have been enough, but life wasn't done with me yet. 2 weeks later, I learned he wasn't just cheating me out of my company. He was cheating on me, with my best friend, Elise. Elise, the one who sat beside me at every cafe brainstorming session. The one who hugged me after long nights of work, who told me I deserved happiness. The one who promised she'd always have my back. I remember seeing them together at a restaurant, his hand resting on hers, both of them laughing like I never existed. I didn't confront them. Not that night. I walked out quietly, my heart silent and still. But inside, something else woke up. Something that had been sleeping for far too long. The days after I discovered the truth about Adrian and Elise blurred together like watercolors in rain. I moved into a cramped studio apartment in a neighborhood I'd never visited before, where the streetlights flickered and sirens were the soundtrack of night. My savings, what little Adrian hadn't touched, dwindled with each passing week. I stopped eating properly. Sleep became a stranger. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, Adrian's smirk, Elise's betrayal written in her laughter. The injustice of it burned through me like acid. But there was something else, too. A clarity I'd never experienced before. During one particularly dark night, while scrolling through job listings on my cracked laptop screen, I stumbled upon something that would change everything. An article about corporate espionage, about how companies fell not through external attacks but internal rot. The writer, someone named Marcus Chin, detailed case after case of businesses destroyed by their own hubris. I read every word 3 times. Then I found Marcus. He worked as a freelance investigative journalist, the kind who dug up dirt on corrupt CEOs and exposed fraud. His contact information wasn't hard to find. At 3 a.m, fueled by cheap coffee and desperation, I sent him an email. "I have a story for you. One about stolen companies, forged documents, and a man who thinks he's untouchable. Interested? He replied within an hour. Always. We met at a dingy cafe on the outskirts of the city. Marcus was older than I expected, mid-40s with gray streaking through his dark hair and eyes that had seen too much. He ordered black coffee and listened without interrupting as I laid out everything. The contracts, the theft, the betrayal. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. You have proof? Some. Not enough for a lawsuit that would actually go anywhere. Adrian's lawyers are too good. Then what do you want from me? I met his gaze steadily. I want to learn. I want to know how to take someone apart piece by piece without leaving fingerprints. Marcus studied me for a long moment. Then he smiled, not warmly, but with understanding. You're not looking for justice. You're looking for revenge. Is there a difference? Sometimes. He pulled out a worn notebook. I'll help you. But you need to understand something first. Revenge is architecture. You don't just swing a wrecking ball. You find the foundation, the weight-bearing walls, and you dismantle them systematically. It takes patience. Time. Are you prepared for that? I didn't hesitate. Yes. Over the next 3 months, Marcus became my unlikely mentor. He taught me how to dig through public records, how to create untraceable online personas, how to plan information that would spread like wildfire through industry channels. He showed me the art of the anonymous tip, the strategic leak, the perfectly timed revelation. Information, he told me one evening as we sat in his cluttered apartment surrounded by monitors and files, is the most powerful weapon in existence. More than money, more than physical force. Because once you control the narrative, you control everything. I was a quick study. My background in design meant I understood visual manipulation, how to make fabricated documents look authentic, how to craft screenshots that told a story even if the story was fiction. But I learned to use these skills sparingly, carefully. The best lies, Marcus taught me, were wrapped in truth. While I learned, I also worked. The Lena Moore identity wasn't just a pseudonym, it was a complete reconstruction. I created a portfolio of work that was unmistakably mine but styled differently. More aggressive, sharper edges, darker color palettes. The pain I felt translated into art that made people uncomfortable in the best way. My first client as Lena was a small tech startup looking for rebranding. I charged half my usual rate and delivered work that exceeded expectations. They referred me to another client. Then another. The commissions grew. My reputation built itself through excellence and word of mouth. But everything I did had a dual purpose. Every client I took, every connection I made, I asked myself, how can this help me destroy Adrian? 6 months into my transformation, I made my first real move. Through Marcus's connections, I learned that Viridian was courting a major investor, Catherine Liu, a venture capitalist known for her ruthless business acumen and zero tolerance for dishonesty. She was considering a $2 million investment that would catapult Viridian into the major leagues. I needed to meet her. Lena Moore received an invitation to a design conference in Manhattan, one where Catherine was a keynote speaker. The ticket cost more than I could afford, but I bought it anyway. This was an investment in my future, even if that future was built on someone else's ruins. Catherine's speech was about integrity in business. The irony wasn't lost on me. I approached her afterward during the networking session, my heart hammering but my face calm. Ms. Liu? I'm Lena Moore. I've been following your work for years. She sized me up with sharp eyes. Lena Moore. I've seen some of your designs floating around. Impressive work. Thank you. I actually wanted to ask your advice about something. I lowered my voice slightly. I recently discovered that a company I'm considering partnering with might not be entirely transparent about their origins. How do you typically vet potential investments? Catherine's interest sharpened. Thoroughly. Background checks, financial audits, speaking with former employees. Why? What company? I hesitated, playing my part perfectly. I probably shouldn't say. But if you're ever considering working with Viridian Design, you might want to look deeper into how the company actually started. I didn't elaborate. I simply excused myself, leaving her with just enough curiosity to do her own digging. Marcus called it planting seeds. The best manipulations were the ones where your target thought they discovered the truth themselves. 2 weeks later, I learned through my network that Catherine had launched a full investigation into Viridian before committing her investment. She found inconsistencies. Questions about the founding documents. Rumors about a missing co-founder. The deal didn't fall through immediately, but it stalled. Adrian would be scrambling to explain, to cover tracks he didn't even know were visible. Meanwhile, I turned my attention to Elise. Elise's brand, Luminaire, had launched with considerable fanfare. She specialized in lifestyle design, the kind of aspirational aesthetics that flooded Instagram feeds. Her success was built on Viridian's connections, on the network I had helped create, now stolen and repurposed. But Elise had always been sloppy. While she excelled at presentation, she cut corners on execution. I knew this because I'd helped her through countless projects when we were friends, fixing her mistakes, sharpening her rough edges. Now those weaknesses would be her downfall. I created an anonymous account on a design forum, one of those professional communities where designers discussed their work and shared resources. As a user named Design Watch, I began posting subtle observations about Luminaire's work. Anyone else notice the similarity between Luminaire's Serenity collection and the 2019 Moroccan Heritage series by Kareem Studio? I included side-by-side comparisons. The similarities were real. Elise had always borrowed heavily from other designers, but I framed them in a way that suggested deliberate plagiarism rather than inspiration. The thread exploded. Other designers chimed in with their own observations. Someone found another similarity. Then another. Within days, the thread had thousands of views. Design blogs picked it up. Industry publications started questioning Luminaire's originality. Elise issued a statement claiming all her work was original, that similarities were coincidental. But the damage was done. The influencers she'd partnered with began quietly backing away, not wanting to be associated with controversy. I watched it unfold from my laptop screen, feeling nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt. Just cold determination. But then something unexpected happened. Marcus called me one evening, his voice tense. We need to meet. Now. We met at our usual cafe. He slid a folder across the table. You need to see this. Inside were printed emails, exchanges between Adrian and someone named David Torrance. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. Who is he? Your father's former business partner. The words hit me like a physical blow. My father, Robert, had died when I was 12. A car accident, sudden and devastating. He'd owned a small architectural firm, nothing major, but it had been his passion. What does my father have to do with this? Marcus's expression was grim. Your father's firm didn't just die with him, Jane. It was absorbed. By David Torrance, who claimed your father owed him money, that there were debts that needed to be settled. Your mother, grieving and overwhelmed, signed over everything to make the problems go away. My hands trembled as I read the emails. Adrian and David weren't just acquaintances, they were friends. Old friends. And in these exchanges, they joked about it. Remember how easy it was with the father? David had written. Like taking candy from a crying widow. The daughter was even easier. Adrian's response, Jane never knew what hit her. Just like Robert never saw you coming. The cafe walls seemed to close in around me. My father's accident. I don't know, Marcus said quietly. The police report said mechanical failure. Brake line ruptured. Could have been an accident. Could have been something else. But Jane, if David was willing to steal from a dead man's family, who knows what he was capable of? I felt something crack inside me, not break, but transform. The revenge I'd been planning suddenly felt small, insufficient. This wasn't just about Adrian and Elise anymore. This was about something deeper, darker, a rot that stretched back over a decade. I need to know everything, I said. Everything about David Torrance. Everything about what happened to my father's firm. Marcus nodded. I figured you'd say that. I've already started digging. Over the next 2 months, Marcus and I constructed a timeline that made my blood run cold. My father, Robert Chin, had started his firm with David Torrance 20 years ago. They'd been college roommates, best friends, partners in every sense. The firm, Torrance and Chin Architects, had been modestly successful. But my father had been the talent. David had been the businessman. Sound familiar? 6 months before my father's death, he discovered financial irregularities. David had been siphoning funds, cooking the books, using the firm as a personal piggy bank. My father confronted him, threatened to report him, to dissolve the partnership. 2 weeks later, my father's car went over a bridge. The police investigation found nothing suspicious. The brake line had corroded, they said. It happens sometimes with older vehicles. Just a tragic accident. But now, reading through the fragments Marcus had uncovered, insurance documents, witness statements, old emails recovered from archived servers, I saw the gaps, the inconsistencies, the questions no one had bothered to ask. And then there was Adrian. Adrian had interned at Torrance Architecture during college. David had mentored him, shaped him, taught him everything he knew. Including, apparently, how to steal someone's life's work. When Adrian met me 5 years ago, it hadn't been chance. He'd known who I was, Robert Chen's daughter, the artist who'd inherited her father's eye for design. He'd pursued me deliberately, targeted me specifically. The realization made me physically ill. He planned this from the beginning, I whispered, staring at the evidence spread across Marcus's desk. Looks that way, Marcus confirmed. You were always the mark, Jane. The company you'd build, the trust you'd give. He learned from David's mistakes. He made it cleaner, more legal. No dead bodies, just dead dreams. I looked up at him. David needs to go down too. He's more protected than Adrian. Built his empire on your father's stolen foundation. He's got lawyers, politicians in his pocket, a reputation as a philanthropist. Marcus paused. But everyone has secrets. We just need to find his. Finding them took time. David Torrance had spent 2 decades carefully constructing his image, the self-made architect, the generous donor, the family man. But Marcus was relentless, and I was learning to be patient. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. I'd continued building Lena Moore's portfolio, taking on increasingly high-profile clients. One of them, a luxury hotel chain, mentioned they were renovating a property designed by Torrance Architecture. Beautiful building, the client told me during our video call. Though between you and me, we've found some concerning issues with the original construction. Corners cut, inferior materials. Our engineers are having to reinforce half the structure. My pulse quickened. That's unusual for such a renowned firm. That's what we thought. We're actually investigating whether to pursue legal action. If this is indicative of other projects. I expressed sympathy and moved on with the conversation. But afterward, I dug deeper. Torrance Architecture had dozens of major projects over the years. I started researching them systematically, looking for patterns. What I found was damning. At least 7 buildings showed signs of substandard construction. Code violations swept under the rug, inspectors who'd looked the other way, materials that didn't match specifications. David had been cutting costs and pocketing the difference for years. But he'd been smart about it. The problems weren't catastrophic, nothing that would cause immediate collapse. Just gradual degradation, issues that would emerge years later when responsibility was harder to trace. This is it, Marcus said when I showed him what I'd found. This is how we bring him down. But we need more. We need someone on the inside. I might know someone. My mother, Rebecca Chen, had rebuilt her life after my father's death. She'd gone back to school, become a civil engineer, spent the last decade working for the city's building inspection department. We'd grown distant over the years. My obsession with design had seemed like a painful echo of my father to her. But now I needed her. We met at her apartment, the first time I'd visited in over a year. She looked older, tired, but her eyes were still sharp. "Jane," she said, embracing me. "It's been too long." "I know, Mom. I'm sorry." I pulled back. "I need to talk to you about Dad." Her expression shifted. "Your father?" "Jane, it's been 15 years. David Torrance killed him." The words hung in the air between us. My mother's face went white. "That's a serious accusation," she finally said. "I know. And I can't prove it. But Mom, I can prove what David's been doing since. The buildings he's constructed that are falling apart. The corners he's cut. The lives he's endangered." I pulled out the file Marcus and I had compiled. "And I think Dad found out about it. I think that's why David had to get rid of him." My mother took the file with shaking hands. She read in silence for nearly an hour while I waited. When she finally looked up, tears streamed down her face. "I always wondered," she whispered. "Your father was so careful with his car. He just had it serviced. And then suddenly..." She wiped her eyes. "The police said it was an accident." I was so lost, so overwhelmed. I just wanted to believe them. "I need your help," I said gently. "You have access to city building records, inspection reports. If there's evidence of what David's been doing, you can find it. If I do this, if we go after him..." She hesitated. "It won't bring your father back." "No. But it will stop him from destroying anyone else." My mother nodded slowly. "What do you need?" Working with my mother transformed everything. She approached the investigation with professional precision, cross-referencing building permits with inspection reports, identifying patterns of approved variances that shouldn't have been granted, tracing payments to inspectors who'd retired suspiciously wealthy. The evidence accumulated like stones in a cairn, each one small but together building into something undeniable. Meanwhile, Adrian's world continued to crumble. Catherine Liu had pulled her investment from Viridian, citing concerns about company leadership and founding documentation. Other investors began asking questions. Adrian had to hire lawyers to deal with the sudden scrutiny. But I wasn't done with him yet. Through Lena Moore's growing network, I learned that Viridian was competing for a massive contract with a European luxury brand looking to rebrand. The contract was worth millions and would cement Viridian's position in the industry. I wanted that contract. Using everything I'd learned from Marcus, I positioned Lena Moore as the alternative choice. I crafted a portfolio specifically tailored to the brand's aesthetic, showcased work that pushed boundaries while respecting their heritage. I reached out to contacts who knew contacts, building a bridge to the decision-makers. And then I did something that surprised even myself. I told them the truth. Not about my identity, but about the quality of Viridian's work. I provided evidence, real evidence, of projects Adrian had mismanaged, of clients left unsatisfied, of designs that were more flash than substance. I didn't fabricate anything. I didn't need to. Adrian's actual track record was damning enough when someone bothered to look closely. The European brand chose Lena Moore. When the announcement hit the industry, it sent shockwaves. An unknown designer beating out an established firm for a prestigious contract. Design blogs exploded with speculation. Who was this Lena Moore who'd seemingly appeared from nowhere? I gave one interview, carefully anonymous, just voice and silhouette for a design podcast. I believe design should be honest, I said when asked about my philosophy. Too many people in this industry are good at selling themselves but mediocre at the actual work. They build empires on stolen foundations and wonder why everything eventually crumbles. The interviewer laughed, not knowing how literal I was being. Sounds like you have someone specific in mind. Let's just say I've seen too many talented people get erased by those who are better at taking credit than creating anything worth crediting. The episode went viral in design circles. People started asking questions about stolen foundations and erased creators. Some speculated I was taking a shot at Viridian. They weren't wrong. Adrian called me for the first time in almost a year. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was tight with desperation. "Jane, I know you're behind this somehow. I don't know how, but I know. We need to talk. There are things you don't understand. Please. Call me back." I deleted the message without responding. Elise reached out too, through a mutual acquaintance. She wanted to meet, to clear the air, to explain things. The request was pathetic enough that I almost ignored it entirely. But Marcus convinced me otherwise. "Meet with her," he said. "Learn what they know. See if they've connected the dots yet." We met at a coffee shop in neutral territory. Elise looked terrible, dark circles under her eyes, her usual polish gone. She'd lost weight, and not in a healthy way. "Jane," she said when I sat down. "Thank you for coming. I almost didn't. I deserve that." She wrapped her hands around her cup. "I want to apologize. For everything. Adrian and it was a mistake. I was stupid and selfish and I destroyed our friendship for a man who's now destroying you." I interrupted. "How's Luminaire doing, Elise?" She flinched. "It's been difficult. The plagiarism accusations were based on reality. You always did borrow too heavily from other designers. That's not fair." "Fair?" I leaned forward. "You want to talk about fair? You slept with my boyfriend and helped him steal my company. But some anonymous internet comments about your actual design practices, that's where you draw the line?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Adrian told me you'd signed away your rights voluntarily. That you wanted out of the business side. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. There's a difference." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Elise said quietly, "He's using me too, isn't he? Adrian. That's what this is about. He's using me the same way he used you." I studied her face. She looked genuinely broken, genuinely lost. For a brief moment, I felt something that might have been pity. But only for a moment. "Yes," I said simply. "He is. That's what Adrian does. He finds talented people, attaches himself to them, and bleeds them dry. Then he moves on. Is there any way to stop him?" I stood up. There was. A year ago, when you were my best friend and could have been honest with me. But you chose him instead. I grabbed my coat. "You'll figure it out, Elise. Or you won't. Either way, I can't help you anymore." I left her sitting there, and I didn't look back. The pieces were all in place. My mother had compiled a comprehensive report on Torrance Architecture's code violations and construction fraud. Marcus had copies of communications showing the relationship between David and Adrian, including enough suggestive evidence about my father's death to warrant a new investigation. My own documentation of how Adrian had stolen Viridian was meticulous and damning. The question was how to deploy it all for maximum impact. "We go to the media," Marcus suggested. "I have contacts at major outlets who'd run this story in a heartbeat." But I shook my head. Too risky. David has connections. He could suppress it, spin it, make us look like we're making wild accusations. We need something more official. The police? For David's construction fraud, yes. But for Adrian? I smiled slowly. I have a better idea. 3 days later, Viridian announced they'd been selected as finalists for the prestigious Harrington Design Prize, one of the industry's highest honors. The prize came with $100,000 and virtually guaranteed success in the field. I'd been selected as a finalist too. As Lena Moore. The competition required a live presentation in front of a panel of industry legends and a large audience. It would be broadcast online. Thousands would watch. It was the perfect stage. I spent weeks preparing my presentation. Not just the design work, that was already excellent, but the story behind it. The narrative that would tie everything together. The night before the competition, I couldn't sleep. I stood at my apartment window, looking out at the city lights, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. My father's death. Adrian's betrayal. The year of systematic destruction I'd orchestrated. Was I doing the right thing? The question surprised me. I'd been so focused on revenge, on justice, on balance, that I'd never stopped to wonder if I was becoming something I'd hate. I called Marcus. Second thoughts, he asked immediately. How did you know? Because anyone with a conscience would have them. He paused. Jane, I want you to understand something. What you're doing, it's not just revenge. You've exposed real fraud, real corruption. David Torrance has endangered lives with his construction practices. Adrian stole your life's work. These aren't good people having a bad day. They're predators who've gotten away with it for too long. But what does it make me? Someone who fought back. Someone who refused to be a victim. Another pause. But after tomorrow, after you do what you're planning to do, you need to let it go. You need to walk away and build something new. Real revenge isn't destroying them. It's living better than they ever could. I absorbed his words. Thank you, Marcus. For everything. Just promise me you'll be okay after this. I promised to try. The next day, I arrived at the venue early. The auditorium was stunning, modern architecture with soaring ceilings and perfect acoustics. Camera crews set up their equipment. Audience members filed in. I spotted industry leaders, influencers, journalists. And there, near the front, was Adrian. He looked haggard. The past year had worn him down, financial stress, legal challenges, the constant questions about Viridian's legitimacy. But he'd managed to create enough impressive work to make it to the finals. His talent for appropriating other people's ideas remained intact. He didn't recognize me at first. I'd changed my appearance over the year, shorter hair, different style, the kind of subtle transformations that make someone familiar seem like a stranger. But when our eyes met across the auditorium, I saw the moment of recognition. The shock. The fear. I smiled at him. The competition began. 3 other finalists went before me and Adrian. Each presentation was excellent, showcasing the kind of innovative design that pushed the industry forward. Then it was Adrian's turn. He presented Viridian's latest work, a rebranding campaign for a tech company. The designs were slick, professional, effective. He spoke confidently about his creative process, his vision, his company's success. But I noticed something. Half the designs he showed were concepts I'd created during our partnership. He'd refined them, presented them as new work. But the bones were mine. The audience applauded politely when he finished. Then it was my turn. I walked to the stage, feeling the weight of 100 eyes on me. The lights were bright, but not blinding. I could see faces in the audience. I could see Adrian, pale and tense in his seat. Good evening, I began. My name is Lena Moore. But that's not the name I was born with. A murmur ran through the audience. Adrian's eyes widened. I'm here tonight to present my work. But I'm also here to tell you a story about the design industry, about theft, about what happens when we value presentation over substance, when we let charming liars build empires on stolen foundations. The moderator shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't standard competition procedure. But the audience was rapt, and the cameras were still rolling. I advanced to my first slide, not a design, but a photograph. My father with his former partner, standing in front of their firm's sign. Torrance and Chen Architects. 20 years ago, my father built a business with his best friend. My father was the creative force. His partner handled the business side. Sound familiar? I looked directly at Adrian. My father died when I was 12. His partner claimed my father owed him money, convinced my grieving mother to sign over everything, and built an empire on work he didn't create. His name is David Torrance. Some of you know him. Some of you have worked with him. And many of you have probably heard the same story from others in this industry. The murmurs grew louder. I saw David in the audience now. He'd come to watch Adrian, to support his protégé. His face was turning red. I grew up watching my mother struggle while the man who stole from my father prospered. I studied design, wanting to honor my father's legacy. And 5 years ago, I met a man who seemed to believe in me. His name is Adrian Reeves. Adrian started to stand, but someone next to him pulled him back down. Together, we built a company called Viridian. I created the designs. He handled the business. And then, systematically, he erased me from the company I'd founded. He forged documents, moved funds, replaced my name with his own. When I confronted him, he told me I should thank him for protecting me from myself. I advanced through my slides now, showing the original incorporation documents with my name, the altered versions, email chains, financial records. Everything. But here's what Adrian didn't know. You can't erase someone who refuses to be erased. The next slides showed my work as Lena Moore, the clients I'd built up, the reputation I'd crafted, the excellence I'd achieved. I rebuilt myself. I became better than I ever was before. Because pain, when channeled properly, doesn't destroy you. It transforms you. I showed the comparative analysis of designs, Adrian's recent work next to the originals I'd created, showing how he'd appropriated my concepts. The design industry has a problem. We celebrate the wrong people. We give platforms to those who are good at self-promotion rather than actual creation. We let theft slide as long as it's done with a smile and good branding. And we forget the people who do the real work, the ones whose names disappear from credits while others collect the awards. The auditorium was dead silent now. Even the moderator had given up trying to intervene. So yes, I'm here to compete tonight. My work speaks for itself, you can judge it on its merits. But I'm also here to say, no more. No more stolen credit. No more erased founders. No more letting the David Torrances and Adrian Reeves of the world build success on other people's destruction. I advanced to my final slide, my actual design presentation, the work I'd created for the competition. It was a comprehensive rebranding campaign, but the name of the fictional company told the story, Reclaim. This is my entry. A brand built around the idea of taking back what's yours. Of refusing to be erased. Of fighting back with excellence rather than just anger. I finished my presentation, the actual design work was stunning, some of the best I'd ever created. When I was done, the audience sat in shocked silence for a moment. Then someone started clapping. It was Catherine Liu, the investor who'd pulled out of Viridian. She stood up, applauding. Others joined her. Within seconds, half the auditorium was on their feet. But not everyone was celebrating. David Torrance stormed out. Adrian sat frozen in his seat, his face ashen. Security was moving toward the stage, unsure whether to escort me out or let the moment continue. The head judge, a legendary designer named Sarah Martinez, stood up. That was highly irregular. But also necessary. She looked at the other judges. I think we need a recess to discuss how to proceed. As I left the stage, journalists surrounded me. Cameras flashed. Questions flew. But I walked through them silently, making my way to the exit. Marcus met me outside. Well, you certainly made an impression. Did I just destroy my career? He laughed. Are you kidding? You just became the most talked about designer in the industry. Win or lose that competition, everyone's going to want to work with you now. Assuming you don't get sued for defamation. I only stated facts. I know. But Adrian will still try. As if on cue, Adrian emerged from the building. He walked straight to me, ignoring Marcus, ignoring the journalists still milling around. "You destroyed me," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "I destroyed the lies you built around yourself. The real you was always this empty." "I never meant," he stopped, seeming to realize the futility of whatever excuse he was about to offer. "What did David do to your father?" The question surprised me. "You don't know?" "I know he took over your dad's firm. I know it made him wealthy. I never asked for details." He looked genuinely haunted. "Jane, I learned everything from David. The contracts, the manipulation, how to make someone trust you completely before you take everything. He taught me. But I swear, I didn't know about your father specifically. I didn't know it was your father until... Until when? Until about 6 months ago. When things started falling apart. I went to David for advice, and he laughed. He said history was repeating itself, that the Chin family made it too easy." Adrian's voice cracked. "I didn't understand what you meant about stolen foundations until that moment." I studied his face, looking for the lie. But all I saw was a broken man realizing he'd been a pawn in someone else's game. "You still made your choices," I said. "David taught you, but you chose to use those lessons on me. You chose Elise. You chose to erase my name. Those were your decisions." "I know." He looked down. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I know it doesn't change anything, but I am." "You're right. It doesn't change anything." He nodded and walked away, shoulders slumped. I watched him go, feeling nothing. The man I'd once loved was gone, if he'd ever really existed at all. Marcus touched my shoulder. "Jane, we need to talk about timing. Your mother filed her report with the district attorney this morning. They're opening an investigation into Torrance architecture. And I just got word that the police are reviewing your father's case file based on the evidence we provided." "How long before?" "Before David gets arrested? Could be days, could be weeks. But it's coming." He paused. "Are you ready for all of this to go public? For the media frenzy? For your real identity to be connected to Lena Moore?" I thought about it. The anonymity had been protective, a shield. But maybe it was time to stop hiding. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." The design competition results were announced 3 days later, during which time the industry had been consumed by speculation about my presentation. Half the design community praised my courage in exposing corruption. The other half accused me of grandstanding, of using the competition as a platform for personal vendettas. I didn't win first place. That went to a brilliant designer from Seoul whose work genuinely deserved the recognition. But I placed second, which came with its own prize money and prestige. More importantly, I'd accomplished what I set out to do. The real explosion came when the district attorney's office announced their investigation into Torrance architecture. The charges were extensive: construction fraud, bribery of public officials, building code violations that had endangered lives, tax evasion. The investigation, led by my mother's comprehensive report, revealed a pattern of corruption spanning 15 years. When news broke that David Torrance, philanthropist, respected architect, pillar of the community, was facing criminal charges, the media went into a feeding frenzy. Every project his firm had touched came under scrutiny. Building owners filed lawsuits. Clients demanded audits. The empire David had built crumbled faster than any structure he'd ever designed. And then came the part I'd been waiting for. The police reopened my father's case. The detective assigned, a woman named Sandra Martinez who specialized in cold cases, called me personally. "Ms. Chen, I've reviewed the original accident report from 15 years ago. Combined with the new evidence of David Torrance's criminal behavior and his financial motive, I have enough to justify a full investigation. Will you be able to prove it was murder?" "I don't know," she admitted. "After 15 years, physical evidence is mostly gone. But we have financial records showing that your father discovered Torrance's fraud just weeks before his death." We have emails where Torrance threatened his problem would be handled permanently. And we have the forensic fact that brake line corrosion that severe doesn't happen overnight. Someone would need to help it along. What happens now? We build a case. Interview witnesses, reconstruct timelines, work with prosecutors. It won't be quick, Ms. Chen. But I promise you, we'll find the truth. I thanked her and ended the call, then sat in silence for a long moment. My mother was coming over for dinner, our first real family meal in years. Marcus had sent flowers with a note, "You did it. Now live." But had I done it? Justice was in motion, yes, but justice is slow and uncertain. David had lawyers. Adrian had lawyers. The legal battles would drag on for months, maybe years. Yet something had shifted. The truth was out. The lies had been exposed. People knew what had been done to my father, to me, to countless others. That knowledge itself was power. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Jane. It's Elise. I saw everything. I'm so sorry. For all of it. I've shut down Luminaire. I'm leaving the industry. You were right about Adrian, about everything. I hope someday you can forgive me, but I understand if you can't. You deserved better than both of us. E. I read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. Some apologies come too late to matter. Another message arrived, this one from Sarah Martinez, the head judge from the competition. Lena/Jane, I'd like to offer you something. I'm starting a mentorship program for young designers who've been exploited or erased in the industry. Based on your story, I think you'd be the perfect person to help run it. Interested? I smiled. That was interesting. Turning my pain into something that could help others. I typed back, very interested. Let's talk. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. My real identity became public knowledge, and with it came speaking invitations, interview requests, clients who specifically wanted to work with Jane Chen, the designer who'd fought back. I started the mentorship program with Sarah. We called it Foundation, a name that meant something to me. We worked with designers who'd had their work stolen, their names erased, their contributions minimized. We taught them how to protect themselves legally, how to document their work, how to fight back when necessary. David Torrance was arrested on a Tuesday morning. I watched the news footage of him being led out of his office in handcuffs. He looked old suddenly, diminished. The man who'd haunted my life for 15 years was just another criminal in an expensive suit. The investigation into my father's death moved forward. Detective Martinez was thorough, relentless. She found a mechanic who remembered working on a car matching my father's description just days before the accident, a man who'd asked strange questions about brake lines and how quickly they could fail. The mechanic identified David Torrance from a photo lineup. It wasn't ironclad proof, but it was enough. The district attorney added, conspiracy to commit murder, to David's charges. Adrian's fate was different. Viridian officially dissolved 6 months after my presentation. He wasn't charged with any crimes. What he'd done to me was legally gray, technically not theft because I'd signed documents without reading them carefully, trusting him completely. But his reputation was destroyed. No one in the industry would work with him. His name became synonymous with fraud, with stolen credit, with betrayal. He tried rebranding, starting fresh under a new company name, but people recognized him. The internet doesn't forget. I heard through the grapevine that he'd left the design world entirely, taken a job in sales somewhere in the Midwest. The news didn't bring me satisfaction or joy. Just a quiet acknowledgement that some stories end not with dramatic justice but with quiet obscurity. 2 years after my presentation at the Harrington competition, I stood in front of a new building. Not just any building. My building. My firm's headquarters. I'd named it Chen and Associates Design, honoring my father's legacy while building my own. The associates were designers I'd mentored through the foundation program, talented people who'd been overlooked or exploited, now given a chance to thrive. Marcus stood beside me, looking at the gleaming facade. Your father would be proud. I hope so. I'd thought about my father constantly during the reconstruction, both of my life and of this company. What would he think of what I'd done? Of the revenge I'd taken, the lives I'd disrupted, the satisfaction I'd found in others' downfall? You're wondering if you went too far, Marcus said, reading my expression. Sometimes. Let me tell you what I think. You exposed criminals. You revealed truth. Yes, you did it for personal reasons, but the outcome was justice. David Torrance is in prison for fraud and likely for murdering your father. The buildings he compromised are being fixed before anyone gets hurt. Adrian can't victimize other designers. That's not going too far. That's balance. But I enjoyed it, I admitted quietly. Watching them fall. Planning each move. I enjoyed it, Marcus. What does that make me? Human. He smiled. Jane, you're not a villain. Villains don't lose sleep over whether they went too far. Villains don't build mentorship programs. Villains don't spend their second-place prize money on scholarships for design students who can't afford school. He had a point. In the 2 years since everything had come crashing down, I'd worked harder than ever. But not on revenge. On building. On creating. On helping others avoid what I'd experienced. The foundation had mentored over 50 designers. 3 of them now worked for me. 2 had started successful firms of their own. 1 had won a major industry award. Seeing them succeed felt better than watching Adrian fail ever had. Besides, Marcus continued, you kept your promise. You let it go. After the competition, after the investigation started, you walked away from the revenge part and focused on the building part. That takes strength. My mother joined us, carrying a bottle of champagne. She'd been promoted to head of her department at the city's building inspection office. Her work on the Torrance case had led to systemic reforms in how construction was monitored and approved. Ready to celebrate? She asked, holding up the bottle. More than ready. We went inside. My team was already there, along with Sarah Martinez, several clients, and other supporters. The space was beautiful, filled with light and possibility. On one wall hung a photograph of my father's original firm, a tribute to where it all began. As the celebration went on around me, I found myself standing in front of that photograph. My father looked so young, so hopeful. He died never knowing that his work would be stolen, that his daughter would spend years fighting to reclaim what was taken. But he also never knew that his daughter would rebuild it all. That she'd turn pain into purpose, loss into creation. That she'd become strong enough to face monsters and emerge intact. Talking to Dad, my mother asked, coming to stand beside me. Sort of. Wishing he could see this. He can, she said softly. Wherever he is, I think he's very proud. She paused. I'm proud too. I know the last few years have been hard. I know you had to make difficult choices. But look at what you've built. We built, I corrected. I couldn't have done it without you. Or Marcus. Or Sarah. Or any of the people who believed in me. That's the difference between you and people like David and Adrian, my mother said. They built on stolen foundations, alone, paranoid, always looking over their shoulders. You built with others, honestly, on solid ground. That's why what you've created will last. The celebration wound down eventually. People left with promises to return for our official opening next week. Marcus stayed to help clean up, ever the loyal friend. What's next for you? I asked him as we stacked chairs. I'm actually thinking of writing a book. About corporate fraud, about people who fight back. Might include your story, if you're okay with that. As long as you change the names. He laughed. Deal. When everyone had finally gone, I stood alone in the space. My space. Mine by right, by work, by refusal to accept theft as final. My phone buzzed. An email from Detective Martinez. Jane wanted you to hear this from me first. The jury came back today. David Torrance found guilty on all counts, including conspiracy to commit murder. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. Your father can rest now. So can you. I read the message 3 times, letting the words sink in. Guilty. All counts. Life in prison. It was over. Really over. I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, David sat in a cell, finally facing consequences. Somewhere out there, Adrian lived with his ruined reputation. Somewhere out there, Elise had disappeared into whatever obscurity she'd chosen. And here I stood, in a building with my name on it, with a team I'd built, with a future I'd created from the ashes of my past. People talk about closure like it's a moment, a revelation, a final confrontation, a dramatic ending. But real closure isn't a moment. It's a process. It's waking up one day and realizing you haven't thought about revenge in weeks. It's finding joy in creation rather than destruction. It's learning that the opposite of pain isn't happiness, it's peace. I wasn't sure I'd found peace yet. But I was closer than I'd ever been. The gallery opening was packed. My first solo exhibition, a collection of designs that traced my journey from Jane to Lena to Jane again. Each piece told a story. Of loss, of transformation, of reclamation. The centerpiece was a series I called Architecture of Revenge. It featured 7 designs, each one representing a stage of my journey. The first was fragmented, broken, all sharp edges and harsh angles. The last was whole, balanced, a structure that stood solid and unshakable. Critics called it my masterwork. I just called it honest. Sarah Martinez was there, along with several designers from our foundation program. My mother came, beaming with pride. Marcus stood in the corner, taking notes for his book, which had been published to critical acclaim and actually sparked several other investigations into industry fraud. Quite a turnout, a voice said beside me. I turned to find Catherine Liu, the investor who'd pulled out of Viridian years ago. She'd become a friend and eventual backer of my firm. Thank you for coming, I said. Wouldn't miss it. You know, when I first met Lena Moore at that conference, I knew she was special. I'm glad I trusted that instinct. She gestured at the artwork. Have you heard from Adrian? The question surprised me. No. Why? He reached out to me last month. Asked if I'd consider investing in a new venture. He claims he's changed, learned from his mistakes, wants a fresh start. She studied my face. I wondered if you'd want to weigh in. I thought about it. The old me, the one consumed by revenge, would have sabotaged it immediately. Would have made sure Adrian never got another chance. But that wasn't who I was anymore. It's your decision, I said finally. I can't tell you whether people truly change. I can only tell you what he did to me. What you do with that information is up to you. Catherine nodded slowly. That's remarkably mature. I'm tired of letting him take up space in my head. If he's changed, good. If he hasn't, karma will handle it. I'm done being karma. So what are you now? I smiled. Just Jane. Creating things. Helping others. Living. After Catherine moved on, I stood looking at my artwork. People milled around, discussing the pieces, taking photos, asking questions. This was success, not the destruction of enemies, but the creation of something meaningful. A young woman approached me nervously. She looked barely out of college, clutching a portfolio. Ms. Chen. I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm a design student and I read about your story. About how you rebuilt after everything. I'm going through something similar. My professor is taking credit for my work, and I don't know what to do. I looked at her earnest face, saw myself 5 years ago. Scared. Uncertain. Alone. What's your name? Maya. Maya, have you heard of the foundation? The mentorship program? Yes, but But I thought it was only for established designers. It's for anyone who needs it, I said firmly. Come to our offices tomorrow. Bring your portfolio and documentation of your work. We'll figure out how to help you. Her eyes filled with tears. Really? You do that? Someone did it for me. Now I do it for others. That's how this works. She thanked me profusely and left clutching the business card I'd given her. Marcus appeared at my elbow. Another one? He asked. Another one. You can't save everyone, Jane. No. But I can save some. And they'll save others. Eventually, maybe the industry changes. I looked at him. That's better than revenge, isn't it? Actually fixing the system instead of just punishing people who abuse it? Much better. He raised his glass. To balance. To balance, I echoed. Later that night, after the gallery had emptied and the artwork was locked away, I walked through the city alone. Past the old Viridian building, now converted into apartments. Past the cafe where I'd first met Marcus. Past the restaurant where I'd seen Adrian and Elise together. The ghosts didn't haunt me anymore. I ended up at the cemetery where my father was buried. I hadn't visited in months, not because I was avoiding it, but because I didn't need to anymore. But tonight felt right. I sat on the grass beside his headstone, tracing the letters of his name with my finger. David's in prison, I told him. Life sentence. And I built something, Dad. Something good. Something that helps people. The wind rustled through the trees. In the distance, the city hummed with life. I hope I did right by you, I continued. I know revenge isn't noble. I know I probably should have just let the system handle it, should have been the bigger person. But I couldn't. I needed them to face what they'd done. I needed to fight back. More silence. But it felt less empty than it used to. I'm okay now. Finally. It took years, and I'm not perfect, and I still have angry days. But I'm okay. I smiled. And I'm happy, Dad. Actually happy. Is that allowed? After everything that happened, am I allowed to be happy? Of course I was. That was the final revenge, not just surviving, but thriving. Not just destroying enemies, but building something they could never touch. I stayed a while longer, telling my father about the gallery, about Maya, about all the designers we'd helped. The moon rose higher. The city lights glowed brighter. When I finally stood to leave, I felt lighter somehow. Unburdened. Revenge had consumed me for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to simply exist without it. To create without anger fueling every stroke. To succeed without measuring that success against someone else's failure. But now I remembered. And it was better than revenge ever was. They say the best revenge is living well. I used to think that was a platitude, something people told themselves when they were too weak to fight back. I was wrong. Living well, truly living, not just surviving, is the hardest thing you can do after betrayal. It requires letting go of anger that feels righteous. It requires building when destruction would be easier. It requires choosing growth over grudges, day after day, even when the grudges feel deserved. I don't regret what I did to Adrian and David and Elise. They deserved to face consequences for their actions. But I'm glad I didn't stay in that space of revenge forever. I'm glad I found my way back to creation, to helping others, to actual living. Because in the end, they didn't just take my company or my trust or my father. They almost took my future. Almost made me into someone defined entirely by what was done to me rather than what I chose to do next. But I didn't let them. I took back my name. My work. My life. And then I built something better than what was stolen. That's not karma. That's not revenge. That's reclamation. And 3 years later, standing in my gallery surrounded by art born from pain but no longer consumed by it, working with designers who needed someone to believe in them the way Marcus believed in me, living a life that's mine by choice and effort. This is what victory actually looks like. Not the destruction of enemies, but the reconstruction of self. And if Adrian or David or Elise ever think of me now, they won't remember the scared girl they betrayed. They'll remember the woman who rose from those ashes and built an empire they could never touch. Because I didn't just become karma. I became something better. I became free.